And listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
All right. Well, you are listening to the home of conservative, not bitter talk. I am your host, Todd Huff. You can email me, todd@toddhuffshow.com, facebook.com/toddhuffshow. If you want to watch the program, hour number 1 of the program, hour number 2 is streaming now on YouTube. Good morning, YouTube. Thank you for joining us here. It's good to have you. So last hour, we spoke a little bit about the mask, the politics of wearing a mask, Biden and Kamala Harris's calls for a nationwide order on wearing masks. We shared we shared Trump's response to that as well, which maybe I should do here off the top, just to kind of set the stage for kind of where we left off last hour. We have some folks, and it's not advised to do this. Listening can stop and even reverse the dangerous side effects of liberalism. That's an undisputed fact. In fact, 98% of scientists, that's 1% more of scientists that agree with that statement than believe that man is contributing to and causing global warming. 98% of scientists agree. They realize that listening to this program has been demonstrated to stop and reverse those damaging effects of liberalism, and that listening can in fact cause you to lean to the right. But as with most things, it is better to have a little bit more. So if you missed first hour, I do not advise that. I do not advise missing any part of this program, because we are here to help inoculate you against these dangerous effects of liberalism. We are here to help you to cut through the nonsense that you're being told in many instances in the media, by the Democrat Party, by our elected officials. And so it's good to have you in hour number 2, but hour number 1 you may have missed, right? And so I spend a little bit of time just kind of making sure I give you enough information where we can at least have a point to, I guess, pick up from where we left off last hour. Because in my mind, right, I'm continuing this discussion, but I have to pause and I have to think, hey, some folks may have not been able to hear hour number 1. So here, let's do a quick summary of hour number 2. And I want to play for you. Play for you the soundbite I played at the very end, very last segment of last hour, where President Trump is responding to former Vice President Biden and Senator Kamala Harris, their calls for national mask mandates given by all 50, or as I said last hour, 57 governors if you go by by Obama's count. The Obama administration thought there were 57 states. Anyway, this is what Trump said in response to this. Here it is.
Today we saw Joe Biden continue to politicize a pandemic and to show his appalling lack of respect for the American people. That's what it is. At every turn, Biden has been wrong about the virus, ignoring the scientific evidence and putting left-wing politics before facts and evidence. Sleepy Joe opposed both the China and the Europe travel bans. You know that. He opposed the China travel ban that I instituted very early, and the Europe travel ban that I instituted quite early. If he had followed, if we went after and listened to his advice, hundreds of thousands more people would have died. This is according to many people. I believe that Dr. Fauci agreed with that. He said that President Trump made a great decision when he put the ban on China.
Okay, so Trump is basically saying, hey, not so fast, Sleepy Joe. In fact, you've been wrong on this thing the whole time. I remember, and I don't have the date in front of me, but I remember Trump instituted the travel ban on China. I remember Biden coming out against this. I remember Biden actually didn't actually say that he was in favor of the travel ban until long after the travel ban was instituted. And it makes you wonder, as Trump is pointing out here, it makes you wonder how many more early cases would there have been had we not done something about travel. And Dr. Fauci, of course, says that Trump made the right decision with the travel ban to China or between China and the U.S. and between China and Europe. And Trump's saying, look, you don't get a free pass here, Joe, Sleepy Joe, as he says. You don't get to criticize when you've been consistently wrong about this. The Chinese virus, that's what it is, the Chinese virus. You don't get to have the luxury of lecturing me, of telling the American people that I'm effectively, in a sense, I mean, this is really what this comes down to, that I'm at fault for the coronavirus. You don't get to go around saying that whenever your positions, we have public record of the things that you've been in favor of, that you would have made decisions along the way, and specifically as it pertains to travel between China and the United States and between Europe and the United States. You would have made decisions that put more Americans at risk, that would have caused more death. Biden's out there saying if Trump, he didn't directly say this, but this is the clear path of thinking here, and this is politics, the politics of the coronavirus. If Trump would, lead, effectively is what he's arguing here. If Trump would be a leader and call in these governors and say, look, I need all of you to kind of go lockstep on this, arm in arm, put politics aside, each of you issue a decree in your states saying that if you go outside, you got to wear a mask at least 3 months. That'll take us up to the election. Then we don't have to worry about this anymore, politically speaking. And that's not true. I hear people say that, by the way. I hear people say it's going to magically go away if Biden wins. And I do think that there is a degree. We're talking about the narrative, right? We're not talking about the coronavirus is going to do what the coronavirus does. The coronavirus doesn't care who's in the White House, right? I remember early on, coronavirus, we were told it doesn't matter if you're white, black, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, if you're from Maine or from Texas, from California, from Idaho, Utah, Florida, Indiana, it doesn't matter. This thing doesn't care. It affects everyone equally. I mean, in that sense, it doesn't discriminate. It's very politically correct in that respect, unlike Joe Biden, who discriminates against anyone who's not a black female as far as it pertains to his choice for vice president. Every other racial and gender combination is disqualified. According to Joe Biden, he needed a black female to be his vice presidential candidate, and the coronavirus seems to be less of a discriminator than Joe Biden, because it affects all of us. So the coronavirus is going to run its course and do whatever it does. It doesn't care who's in the White House. Now, you could say that policies that are implemented and put into practice by the government and by extension or by force, depending on how you look at this, the American people, that could impact the life or how long this thing is around, what it looks like. Is it going to be around through the end of the year? Is this thing going to be around for next year? Are we going to have this problem for multiple years to come, as some people are now saying? But it doesn't care. It doesn't care who wins the election. It doesn't care, that Joe Biden has promised already to cure cancer and Alzheimer's and diabetes. Joe Biden can say he's going to cure COVID as well. It doesn't mean that it's suddenly going to happen. And so when I say it's some people think it's magically going to go away after the election. To one degree, as it pertains to the political narrative, I would agree. But you also have to think about this in terms of, again, through the eyes of the radical left. I'm talking about the radical left. I'm not talking about your neighbor who votes Democrat, who's a down-to-earth guy. His kids are in school, his his wife, and, they're normal people. They've just been persuaded, usually by just one single issue, to vote Democrat over take your pick. Those folks are not the radical left. Those folks are just individuals who've been hoodwinked by the smoke and mirrors of this morally bankrupt, in many cases, the ideology of radical liberalism. The one that essentially says your government is your God. The one that essentially says you are a subject before you're a citizen. You are a part of the machine instead of an individual created by Almighty God to live your life as you see fit. That is what I'm talking about, who I'm directing these comments towards. And so we've got people who say that this is going to magically go away if Biden wins election. And I will say, to a point, I see what you're saying. And again, we're talking about the narrative, not the reality. Coronavirus is going to do its thing. There's some things we hope that we can do to impact, to influence how long this thing's around, how dangerous it is, between medication, between vaccines, between treatments, between just safe practices that cut down on the spread. Of course, everyone wants to see this go away. But it's also something that, it's a microscopic virus that can be transmitted in ways that, we're not going to be ever to fully stop. There's just no way to do this at some point. Folks, there's still, unfortunately, people who die of the bubonic plague or something that is largely eradicated, or we think is eradicated, but you see areas where this pops up from different diseases from time to time. Anyway, so I think that the idea that it would go away if that they would stop talking about it and being incessant about it, the counts and the fear-mongering portion of this, which again, we need to understand that it is real, it is a threat. Practice hygiene, try to protect yourself and others, of course, but we don't need the government to tell us that. That's really what this comes down to. Trump says, I trust the American people to make decisions that are in their best interest and for the interest of their families. If everyone is doing this, there's as Adam Smith would say, in an economic sense, on the economic side of this, there's the invisible hand. But even as it pertains to these decisions, if everyone is making decisions that are for their own self-interest, not from selfishness, but making decisions that are good for them and their families, enough people making those decisions, there will be a trend in the right direction, as much as we can impact this. Trump says, I trust the individual. Biden says, I don't. Let's have the heavy hand of government, which is interesting to me. It's always interesting to me to people who put their faith in government, because a government is still run by people, right? They don't trust individual citizens to make the decisions, but they trust people who have power over them to make decisions. And that is as peculiar to me. You can say, oh, well, the average person, Todd, is just not very smart. People are idiots out there. And that's a lot of what you need to know about the radical left. But the arrogance, the condescension, the self-righteousness that comes from thinking not only do you know what's best for you, radical left, but you know what's best for everyone else, and you've got the answers. And if only you had more money or more power or more control or more influence or more whatever, you could make things better for everyone. That's a really problematic lifestyle. None of us are God. None of us have all the answers. That's what's beautiful about a free society that doesn't have a centralized government making these decisions, because there's individuals who come up with their own solutions and ideas, their own, take your pick, whether it's in the case of COVID treatments. You don't just want one line of thinking. There might be some breakthrough that's right around the corner. I don't know. There might not be. I don't want to give a false sense of hope about this. We may be dealing with this for years to come. I don't know. We may be dealing with this for the rest of our lives, some version like we do the flu. I don't know. I do know this, though. I do know this, that government doesn't hold the answers in spite of what they want us to believe. Now, that doesn't mean there's never an example of where the government should, for the interests of, say, the public health, institute policies. But usually those have to be clearly defined. I think there has to be a clear timetable. It has to be done legally. You just can't make decrees. Congress needs to be able to step in and actually vote on this. People need to be held accountable instead of just rogue governors making declarations left or right, especially when it's something that's been around for a while like this. If it's an immediate threat and Congress hasn't had time to intervene and, talk about these things and hold debate, that's one thing, or legislative bodies. And the executive has to be able to be responsive enough to take quick action to put safeguards in place. But this thing has been around for a bit. I mean, it's new. It's still only, on the one hand, several months. But on the other hand, it's been several months, and legislatures could have cast votes on these things. This is not the way that this has been happening. So again, this notion that this is going to go away if Biden wins, the narrative and the focus on this, I don't know that I agree. In one sense I do, but in another I think if this politically helps them, this will not go away. If this helps them achieve more of what they want, which is bigger government, then they will use it. Again, I say that fully understanding. I want you to understand. I'm not saying COVID is fake. I'm just saying they will use it. Both those things can happen simultaneously. It can be a real virus that is dangerous, that offers, that's created fear, and then there can be politicians who want to piggyback on that and use the fear to get what they've long desired they've long desired. In fact, this is where some of these crazy ideas come into play. And you'll hear things like, essentially, we can't have, we look at the economy. Well, some radical leftists like AOC's out there basically saying this is the time we need to fundamentally change our economy because this virus has exposed just how unreliable or how faulty capitalism is. We need to have safeguards for people so that they can take off work. If we were socialistic and no one had to work, then we could take as much time as we want. You could stay home. You wouldn't have to worry about going to work because you have to pay your rent. That's why she wants to make rent. She says, anyway, that's why she wants to make, protect people from being evicted or dealing with rent during these challenging times. They've used this to advance things that they've wanted for a long time. So in that sense, that's why I don't think the election is going to make this go away. There's two things. There's the reality of it. It's going to run its own course. And, of course, whatever we can do to combat it could potentially impact that. But who knows what our abilities are against this thing. The other thing is the narrative. And if it helps achieve the Democrat utopian ideals and dreams, then they will certainly continue to use it if Biden is president or not. I do understand the thought that says they don't want the negative news like they do with Trump if Biden's president. But again, I think if it helps them achieve their purpose and they can keep people turning to government while also keeping a little bit of uncertainty about this by forcing them that direction without maybe throwing Biden under the metaphorical bus quite as much as they have Trump. I think they're willing to do that. So really, really long in this segment, super long. Got to take a break. Next segment will be shorter to get us back on track. You're listening to Conservative Not Bitter Talk. I am your host, Todd Huff, back in just a minute.
Looking to make a conservative, not bitter fashion statement? Check out our apparel online, including brand new items at toddhuffshow.com/shop today.
Are you one of the growing number of Hoosiers who are concerned about higher taxes, ever-increasing spending, and massive debt in Indiana? So am I. I'm Donald Rainwater, and I'm the Libertarian candidate for governor here in the state of Indiana. As your governor, I'll work to reduce the size of state government, protect your individual rights, and keep more of your money in your pocket. I believe every Hoosier is essential. I also believe that every Hoosier has equal protection under the law to operate their business, attend religious observations, and provide an income for their household, even in a crisis. I believe that all Hoosier businesses provide the necessities of life to their owners and employees. As your governor, I will safeguard your rights to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness as defined by you, not the government. To learn more, go to rainwaterforindiana.com. In Indiana, we need better government, not bigger government. And on November 3rd, I need your vote. My name's Donald Rainwater, and I approve this message. Paid for by Rainwater for Indiana.
If you own a rental property, you know the hassles of marketing, renting, collecting, and the handling of maintenance and repairs. One call to Zuluscape can put an end to your property management headaches. Zuluscape has over 20 years of experience helping landlords throughout central Indiana and taking the stress out of owning a rental. From A to Z, let Zuluscape handle it all so you can enjoy owning a rental instead of hating being a landlord. Give us a call at 317-663-8485 or visit our website at Zuluscape.com.
Ever wondered what shooting a real machine gun feels like? At Indie Trading Post, you can have an awesome and